Hey everybody, welcome back to the Help Me Parent podcast. My name is Kylie. I am your host, and with me on the same side of the table, Dr. Ellen Moore. Hello.
Good morning.
I always start the episode with introing us and then where we're sitting at the table. It's a very important issue.
Yeah.
And with us today, we have Billy Smith. Hello.
Good morning.
Welcome back. You were on an episode before.
I was.
And we have you back.
I know.
We're
What
excited.
an honor.
We're excited that you're back. So just tell everybody a little bit about yourself,
Mhm.
how many kids you got, and what you do.
Yeah. So I have 3 children. I have 3 boys. So no little girls. The Lord trusts me a lot with boys, I guess. So I have 3 little boys. They're not so little anymore. I got the oldest one being 18, and they're all leveling up within the next 3 weeks. So
Wow.
18, 8, and 14. So yeah,
Wow.
the boys are full and
Yeah.
excited. Lots of crazy boy things going on at the house, let's just say.
Yeah. Okay?
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
were in all different stages.
Mhm, we are.
Which one is your not favorite kid?
Yeah.
We're not doing that.
No,
we don't
we're
have to
not
kids.
doing that.
Your
Yeah.
favorite stage of what age they're at?
It depends on the day.
Yeah, exactly.
It
Nice.
depends on the day. No, I'm actually enjoying the. I have to be careful because the boys are probably going to listen to this, but I really enjoy the 18.
Okay.
It sounds maybe strange to say that to some, but I
Mhm.
enjoy it because we're becoming closer to the friend level. You know, it's more mentoring. It's more
Mhm.
having dialogue about real life
Mm.
and not so much the, hey, please pick up your shoes, or hey, it's time to go to bed. You
Yeah.
know, those types of things. So I'm enjoying that
Yeah.
18 bracket. It's fun.
Yeah.
I'm sure in a couple of weeks, if you ask me, it might be the
Um,
8-year-old.
Not 18, not even
Yeah.
close.
Yeah.
What is your favorite stage besides the one that you're currently in?
Yeah. There's something, this is going to seem like a cop-out answer, but there really is just something lovely and something extremely hard about every stage.
Mhm.
And so I really did enjoy them all and
Mhm.
struggle in them all.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And because they're all just so different,
Yeah.
you know, at the stage I'm in now with empty nest grown kids who are married, having their own kids and families, looking back, I realize how
Mhm.
easy it was back then
Oh, good.
mhm.
Wow.
comparatively.
Mhm.
And every stage is hard in a different sort of way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
When they're young, you're just tired. It's physically
Mhm.
taxing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think the older they get, the more emotionally taxing it
Mhm.
is. And now, being at a stage where you feel like you're their parent, but your role is so different, and you have zero control.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Mhm.
it's there's something beautiful and hard about every stage.
Yeah. And the good thing is the kids have been given parents from the Lord to watch after them, but then they also have the relationship with Jesus
Right.
on how they're walking through each stage. And so that's kind of leading into my first question that we're going to ask this episode. We should have a bunch of questions sent in by parents. Billy, you also have some questions. So we're just going to talk about questions and hopefully give answers. So kind of leading to what we were talking about, the first question that was submitted, how can I trust God to look after my children?
Well, it's the essence of trust, right?
It is. It is.
Mhm.
Is you just have to choose to do it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Parenting, there's so, like in a lot of areas of life, there's a lot of room for fear.
Certainly.
There is a lot in the world. There's a lot in ourselves. There's a lot in our kids and at school and influences and, social media and,
Mhm.
the list goes on of opportunities for fear. But I think at some point, we just have to come to the point, really in our own personal lives, that says, Lord, you're bigger than all of that.
Yeah.
And so I choose to trust you. I choose to trust you with my own life, and I choose to trust you with the lives of my children.
Yeah, totally. When it's been a time, Billy, that you have had to really say, all right, Lord, I have to trust you, like a scenario,
Yeah.
a year, a few years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's many that know my story by way of being divorced. I've had to trust the Lord often because the children aren't with me all the time. So I unfortunately, but fortunately, had to learn how to trust the Lord from day one of divorce, which was for my children early in life. I think my oldest, he was 5. So it was early. So I had to really learn. And at that point in my life, I wasn't nearly as close to the Lord with my own personal relationships. So I had to learn how to figure that out. Like I've got to get deeper in my relationship with the Lord so that then I can trust the Lord. Otherwise, I'm leaning on my flesh. And subsequently, that's oftentimes, to your point, it's fear. And that fear is very real, and it's very easy to fall into when you don't have the Lord as your rock, and you don't have the Lord as the one that you lean on in those times of difficulty. And it's, as you say before, it's difficult times come, difficult times are going to happen, especially with children, rearing them in 2 separate homes, as I did, and as I still am doing. You have to lean on the Lord often. So I think with the older years, they get to see more and they get to experience more. So for me, I would say the teenage years have been more difficult from that, having to release all of my cares and anxieties to the Lord and release my children to the Lord.
Yeah, because
the
really
older
you're
years.
releasing control.
That's right.
Right?
right.
Because we realize, and I think that's a great point, that, I felt like I lost, quote, control
Yes.
when they left home. But when you go through divorce and they're living in 2 separate households early, I think you're having to do it so much earlier.
Yes.
And to release that control piece, and not that we're like trying to be controlling people. It's just, it's part of the nature of parents, and you are supposed to create a controlled environment.
Certainly.
But when it's like, well, they
Have
only
no
live here
choice here.
half the time,
Yeah.
and I have no control over the other environment. That's a very, very real thing. Did your boys, so your oldest was 5 when you went through the divorce, and did you have the second?
Might have my numbers off now. You're going to make me think back. It's been so many years. So my youngest was, I had the numbers wrong. My oldest was 7. My youngest was 3. So
Okay.
the age was off there just a touch. But yes, so my oldest was 7, turning 8. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, numbers
So
are hard.
3 and 7.
Yeah.
And then you remarried. And how old was the youngest when that divorce happened?
Oddly enough, he was 3 as well. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm turning 4. See, I'm having to do some math in my head. Y'all got me.
Yeah,
on
so
that
for the
with
first
math.
one, it was 7, and your middle child was 3.
3.
And then your youngest was 3.
3, turning 4. Yeah.
Yeah. So
3.
Math is hard. It's okay.
No. So he was turning 3 because he's turning 8. And we, yeah. So,
Yes, there
I
we
got
go.
that right.
Okay.
So he was 3. Yeah.
So did the boys at any point struggle with fear?
Oh, absolutely.
With the going
Absolutely.
back and forth?
Yes. Yeah. And to be very honest, we still deal with some of those things. Not my oldest, of course.
Yeah.
At this point, he's very understanding. And so, but they do. And still my 8-year-old, we still deal with some of the fear things that creep in at times, with not knowing all the story, or not understanding at times why certain things are the way they are.
Yes.
And so yeah, it's not every day, it's not every week, but
Yeah.
it is there still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is, just a great opportunity. I mean, parenting is about living life with your kids.
It is.
Right? And learning how to navigate it yourself and how to help them learn to navigate it.
Certainly.
And so to take advantage of these opportunities in terms of, you know what, there are going to be times when we don't have all the information.
That's right.
We don't know all the answers. We have to do things we don't want to do. But we have an answer for that. We
That's
have
right.
someone who is with us to help us.
Yeah.
And so from early on, being able to hear that and experience it in such a tangible way. I mean, obviously, there's lots of ways for kids to experience fear and to learn to trust God early on. But I think this is a great way, and to just kind of instill that from that early age, which can make them all the stronger.
It
Yeah,
can.
totally.
I think one of the things that really has played as a benefit is when we can have those moments where either they'll, openly let me know that there's a fear
Yeah.
about a situation or something going on, or that the Lord prompts me in such a way that I sense that there's a fear somewhere based on a situation.
Yeah.
And when we can have a dialogue about it and just continue to unpack whatever that fear is, that's been something really that helps in my home, because then they understand that they can come to me with the fear and we can talk about the fear. And I may not have the answer for it, except that the Lord's helping us. That may be my only answer for them at the moment.
Yes.
But we can unpack some of that feeling. And I've noticed, especially with my older one, my older son and I, we have conversations about fear and they're really deep.
Yeah.
But when I reflect back, that depth came by way of us having some really difficult times when he was young addressing fear, or maybe at one point I didn't address the fear when I should have.
Yeah.
And so now we've gotten into a great dialogue to where we have great conversations about life and things that go on. So
Yeah.
there is beauty in what
Yes.
some may say is a mess.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's so smart of you. And something that is really important for parents to remember is parenting is a relationship. It's about a
It is.
relationship with our kids. Developing one, nurturing one. And the only way to have relationship is to talk.
That's right.
And talking takes time. And so creating this space to have intentional time
Yes.
when, and sometimes it doesn't go according to our schedule
Yeah.
because we're like, this would be a great time to talk. And they want to talk at the most inopportune times. But to, as much as possible, to create time and space and take advantage of those moments.
Yeah.
But with fear, we saw it with our kids. The older they got, the more important it was to just name the fear
That's good.
and to just call it what it was and to kind of play out scenarios. Our son, after graduating from college, and I believe he was engaged, not married yet, but he was on the police force and struggled with some just gripping fear, and understandably so.
Yeah.
And so we had to, one of the things that helped kind of break that was for us to just sit down and talk and name the fear.
Yeah.
What is it? What are you afraid of? I'm afraid of dying.
Yeah.
That's very real. I could get shot.
Yeah.
These are very real things. I was talking to another mom whose son, early 20s son, still on his own, but just finding his way as a firefighter, dealing with the same thing.
Yeah.
And to just name it and walk through, okay, worst case scenario. What would happen if you got stuck in a fire? What would happen if you got shot? I would die.
Yeah.
Yes. And that would be very sad for us.
Mhm.
What would it be like for you? Well, I would go to heaven. Well, that sounds pretty good, actually.
Right.
Mhm.
Right?
Right.
And so it's like you just name it
Mhm.
and walk it out, talk it out, but you take the
power away.
the
from
power,
it. Mhm.
yes. You
Mhm.
take the power of it away,
Mhm.
and then it's like, okay,
Mhm.
God's got me.
Yeah.
I can trust him. And if the worst thing that could happen happened,
It's still not that
I would
bad.
be okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you walk through that as a parent though? Because
Yeah.
that's a real conversation to
is.
have. And even like stuff they're going through, how do you in that moment kind of keep your composure and not you freak out or you worry about
Mhm.
depression or anything else that might come up in a conversation? How do you kind of keep your cool?
It's case by case.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
not always, that's another part to this too, is not always do we do it right,
Mhm.
or not always do we
Yeah.
provide the best
Mhm.
answer or the best
Right.
scenario for them to understand. So
Mhm.
I think allowing some grace for ourselves in those cases where we don't, but more importantly,
Mhm.
just doing the best we know how.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was just talking to a gentleman the other day, and we had conversation. Actually, you know what? It wasn't a gentleman. It was you, Kylie. We were talking about yesterday. We
Oh.
were talking about
I'm not a
a
gentleman.
story that you and I shared. It's just taking a deep breath,
Oh, uh-huh.
stopping, taking a deep
Yes.
breath. Ask the Lord, help me, Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then proceeding with your answer. Because often I think we get caught up in this, I got to have an answer. I got to have a situation to resolve or whatever it may be.
Mhm.
And if we just take a deep breath, stop for just a second, and then work out this scenario or walk out this scenario, sometimes it's easier that
Yeah.
way. But
Yeah.
kids
Yeah.
are unique.
Yeah. And I think you do it just by you develop practices in your life
Mhm.
that help you when you continue those practices over long periods of time that help you then in when things kind of pop up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if this is the first time you're
Mhm.
dealing with fear, crisis, all
Mhm.
of that,
Yeah.
it's got a little bit bigger weight
Mhm.
and impact. Whereas if you have like been a follower of Jesus for a long time
Mhm.
and you've had this practice of saying, Lord, help me,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and learning to hear his voice and responding
Mhm.
that way, it helps in these moments.
Yeah.
But it's practice.
Yeah.
It is.
And
Uh-huh.
practice isn't perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you just, like Billy said, do the best you
Mhm.
can.
Do the best.
But I 100%
Yeah.
recommend not doing it on your own
No,
and asking
no.
for the Lord's help
Mhm.
Yeah.
because he really will help us.
He will.
Mhm. Absolutely.
You will.
Something we mentioned earlier just got me thinking. We talked about like kind of with trusting the Lord, you're kind of giving up that control, but as a parent, you're not relinquishing your responsibility onto other people, correct?
Mhm.
You're not kind of giving that control, right? It doesn't all fall on a pastor or a coach or a teacher, right?
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yes.
Mhm.
I would say the responsibility
Mhm.
the responsibility remains ours
That's right.
until they leave the
Yes.
home.
Mhm.
And then we still have a
Mhm.
responsibility, but it's a different
Mhm.
responsibility.
Mhm.
And so we, as parents, we want to take that responsibility, be intentional, wise,
Mhm.
and it is easy to kind of abdicate
Mhm.
that responsibility for whatever it is to other people.
Mhm.
And other people are certainly helpful. We want other people's
Sure.
voices
Mhm.
in our lives.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, it's not up to a counselor to make sure my child is emotionally healthy.
That's right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's not up to the little league coach to make sure they have good social skills.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's my
Mhm.
responsibility, and I invite these people in
Mhm.
to be a part of the process.
Mhm.
And so I'm not abdicating responsibility,
Mhm.
but I am saying, Lord, I need help. And there's some other people who can help me educate my kids. There's some other people who can help me in these different roles. And, but at the end of the day, I'm responsible as the parent. But within that responsibility, I'm saying, Lord, I trust you because I don't know always how to handle this responsibility.
Yeah, totally.
That's good.
So we've talked about fear and trust. Now on the forgiveness side, how do you teach your child to forgive in like a tangible way when they're little, but also kind of when they're older and they're going through real things and have to really deal with forgiveness and other people when they get involved?
Yeah.
I could see that
Yeah.
being an issue
Yes.
with your story and the story of
Absolutely.
your boys.
I think the first step to this is always walking it out as an example. It's hard as an adult being a father or being a mother to always extend forgiveness because you're offended or you choose to be offended is really what happens in these cases. But
Especially when you've gone through a divorce
that's true.
or going through a divorce.
Absolutely. So I think the first step for me was always to do my best to walk out a good example of what it looks like to forgive someone. But as the children, oftentimes they don't understand what that may look like. So my job then is to explain it to them. Again, I have a whole range of, the ages are very different. So age specific, I would explain to them what that looks like. So how we receive forgiveness, how we extend forgiveness. And we always go back to the scripture, of course. And then we just walk it out and know too that it's a day-to-day process. It's not a one and done. It's not a situation that you say, I forgive you and accept forgiveness and move along. And sometimes that other person may not ever be told, hey, I forgive you. Will you forgive me? And that's okay too. And so just walking out how to forgive is the example component of it, I think has been really helpful for me. And then again, having dialogue about it with the children. Dad, how do you have forgiveness for somebody that you did wrong? Or how do you forgive yourself for doing wrong yourself? And being vulnerable and just letting them know up front. It's not always easy, but this is what we do. And this is the benefit we get later. So.
Yeah,
Totally.
I think when our kids are young is a great time to start it when it is simple. It's simpler than as they get older. There's so many more dynamics and nuances and they understand a lot more. So to start when they're really young, that when they do something wrong, be it to a parent, to a grandparent, to a sibling, that we walk them through what it looks like to own it and say, I'm so sorry. And to be specific, I'm sorry I hit you. I'm sorry I disobeyed. And then it's not just I'm sorry, it's will you please forgive me? And that can feel kind of awkward when it's between something the child has done to me.
Yes.
Yes. So now tell mommy, will you please forgive me?
Yes.
But it's important. And then you say, yes, I forgive you. And then you hug, you restore the relationship. Because when wrong is done, when a mistake is made, it breaks the relationship. It doesn't destroy the relationship, but it impacts the relationship. And that's always what we go back to. That's what we're after, is the relationship. That's what Jesus is after. And so we walk them through what it looks like to own it, say, I'm sorry for exactly what it was. Will you please forgive me? Yes, I forgive you. And then the relationship is restored. It brings full closure. And then we don't hold it against them.
That's it.
Once it's done, it's done. So it's not like, oh, you have done that 3 times this week, which may be true. But if we've forgiven and moved on
Mhm.
from the first two. We're dealing with this
Okay.
one.
Mhm.
That's right.
And then if you start that early and they kind of learn the process,
Mhm.
then as they get older and there's some of these other nuances like, well, what if the other person doesn't forgive me, or I can't say it to them to their face, or
Mhm.
the wrong's been done to me
Mhm.
and they won't say it,
Mhm.
ask me, you deal with that in age appropriate, developmentally appropriate ways along the way.
Yeah.
One of the big things too is the forgetting component. As the kids get older, they still remember some of the things, especially coming from a divided home situation. Well, they did this to me,
Yeah.
but you've forgiven them, and always remembering the fact that they are still forgiven. And it may take me 4 or 5 times in a day to walk through that thought that came in my head, but
Yeah.
you don't have to forget, but you have to forgive.
Yes.
And so
So, like in a scenario where it's a single parent or divorce has happened, or even if it's like a generational hurt is a good way to put it, it's not worth it to bring up in front of the kids, oh, well, your mom did this, or your grandmother treated me this way. Is it fair? Or you don't even bring that up?
no, I don't think that's fair.
Do you even bring it up with them, or
I don't know.
or talk about
I'm
it?
trying to think about a good example.
Mhm.
I would say I don't know that it would be helpful for the parent to initiate that conversation, but as kids get older, they're very perceptive and they will begin to ask questions. And at that point, I think it's very helpful to be honest and to say, you know, if the child is like, hey, I've noticed that grandma does this a lot, or so-and-so's relationship, they just, the way they treat each other is very different. Or sometimes I think you act like grandma, you act like grandpa. And to then have those conversations and say, you know what, that is so true. And here's some things you might not know about grandma and how she grew up, and some things that impacted her. And so maybe that is why she responds like that,
really
or
good.
spoke like she did. So not that we're necessarily as parents bringing up these issues, maybe that we're very aware of and maybe working through ourselves. We're not trying to process that with our kids, but when our kids notice it and bring it up, it's a great opportunity to have these conversations. Yeah, I think when it's not always wise for us to initiate those conversations if we're in the middle of processing them, or it's a dynamic between me as a parent and my mom or my dad or my aunt or my husband, that we're not processing that. But once our kids notice something and ask a question and say, then at that point we're honest and we don't process it with them, but we do give them context. And I think it kind of humanizes everybody and say, well, dad did this, you know, or dad yelled at me, whatever, and say, why does he do that? And at that point, when it's age appropriate to say, you know what, let me tell you some things that maybe dad has dealt with in the past or is dealing with now. And this is a great opportunity for us to just have a little grace or to be extra sensitive. Or you know what? Ask him sometime to tell you the story about when he was a kid. And it just like humanizes everybody.
Yeah, totally. Have you had those conversations? Have any of your boys brought up like, why has this happened? Or why has mom said this? Or why have you said this or done this?
Certainly. Yes, absolutely. Almost every week. Yeah, we do. We have
Like
it
just
often.
this morning.
Yeah, we have those conversations often. But to your point, age appropriate, I have to be able to. It's really kind of humbling in some ways, because it's almost like I get a little counsel session with them internally, because I'm like, oh my goodness, I do that, but why did I do that? And wow, I made a remark, but that was out of fear. Oh my goodness, I displayed my fear in a negative behavior, whatever that may be. But we have those conversations often. And I think that being, again, open and transparent with them, especially if it's something about behavior that is not so good, to explain to them, my behavior might not have been appropriate. My behavior might not have been the best, but I'm sorry for that. And this is why I did it. It goes a long ways, and it builds trust in the children too.
Yeah.
So then they can say, well, if dad or mom has a comment or does something, they're willing to come to me and explain it. They're willing to say, I messed up and raised my voice when I should have been calm. Well, my raising my voice was because I was fearful that you were going to fall off your bike and hurt yourself without a helmet. Those types of things are really, really important to have those conversations.
Yeah, that's really good. Another question that got submitted. How do you respond to a child who vents at you? How does that?
Yeah.
It's kind of what we are talking about a little bit.
So my approach, I've not always handled this the best. I'll be honest, early on in my child rearing days, I would come with them at equal to or greater level of authority. And but
volume.
Yes, and volume. That's right. And so after learning from my mistakes, I actually have taken a different approach. And children are specific to different ways of obviously parenting. So, but for the bulk of my parenting, I can come down a notch and get far more out of them and far more into them than I can to go at or above their level of frustration. So I personally take it child by child, and then I try to handle it at a very low level. Because if they're already upset or already offended or already feeling sad or feeling offended or angry or whatever that emotion is, by me coming in and adding to it, it never resolves anything. It only makes it worse, as I've noticed anyways for my family.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's so tempting to, when things are escalated emotionally for anyone, parent, child, anybody, in the midst of that moment, you're not going to get anywhere.
No.
It's literally the brain function the emotion is taken over to the degree that truly, on a very physiological level, your brain cannot process appropriately. And so to get into a discussion or explanation or any of that, it's just not going to be beneficial to anybody. So when they're young and there's venting in terms of expressing emotion in a very vocal way or a very physical way, first we want to make sure that they're safe, that they're not hurting themselves, have a potential to hurt themselves or anybody else. And then give them a space where they can calm down without commandeering the environment of the whole house or the whole wherever you are. And so have them go to their room. When they're little, you may have to take them to their room and let them calm down and say, when you're ready, we can talk. And you check in with them every few minutes. And I think that really stays true through the ages, and maybe you're not taking them to their room. It's like, you know what? I can see you're upset.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you're upset. Why don't you take a little bit,
Mhm.
calm down, and then let's talk about this.
Yeah.
But I don't think now is the best time for us to
Yeah.
talk about it for
Mhm.
you or for me.
Yeah.
And again, to be honest, they're venting, and after they've had a hard day at school, and you're like, you know what? This isn't the time or the place.
Yeah.
Because you know what? I had a hard day too.
Mhm.
So let's both take some time
That's right.
and take a pause. And in 30 minutes, we'll check in with each other and see if we're at a place we can talk.
Mhm.
That's something I wish I would have done sooner if I could go back. Take the time to be
Yeah.
honest with them and say, I don't want to have this conversation right now either. We'll have it in 30 minutes.
Yep.
But right now is not good for me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to help you. You're not going to help
Mhm.
me. We're not going to help each other. So let's both take a little bit of time and then come back.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
And then you come back and you actually have the conversation.
That's right.
You're not like, okay, they forgot about it. They've calmed
Yeah.
down.
Right.
Yeah.
I am kind of like, I'm just gonna like
Mhm.
cross that line again. But because you said you do it and you, like you said, you restore that relationship. Because
Right.
in a way, the anger, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
we're heated. Something's going on right now. Let's
You're
get to the bottom of it.
You're
relation-
reacting at that point, not responding. And I think
Right.
that's where we find ourselves in trouble, is when we react instead of respond.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the relationship has been affected
Uh-huh.
Yes.
as a result of that.
Mhm.
That's right.
And so to then just never come back to it,
Mhm.
the relationship is just kind of,
Like in limbo. Like,
Yeah.
what's going on? Uh-huh.
yeah, it's just everybody feels it,
Mhm.
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 but nobody's saying anything. So I think this is where we as parents have to be the adults in the
Mhm.
That's
room
right.
and be willing to circle back, even not knowing what we're going to get
Mhm.
when we circle back.
Mhm.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
If things have been left opened, like say something had happened and it's been a few times, how do you then deal with that in the future? Like if it comes back up, like, hey, we didn't finish this conversation. There's still some lingering emotions or unsaid thing. How do you kind of make up for that? If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think, like we've said,
Mhm.
parenting, you're not going to get it right
Mhm.
all the time.
Mhm.
And there's going to be times you feel like you're not getting it right any of the time, but we just plug on,
Yeah.
we
Uh-huh.
carry on. So I think at whatever point something comes to our mind or to our realization that, oh, I think this is unfinished, this is unsettled, then you ask the Lord for the right
There you
time.
go.
And then you go in with some questions.
Yeah.
And you say, hey, I just remembered the other day that this happened last week, but whatever happened and we had to leave, we never got to circle back. Is there anything you would like to say?
So good.
Mhm.
Anything I need to hear? Anything you need me to say
Mhm.
to bring resolve?
Mhm.
So I would say whenever it comes to your mind,
Mhm.
that's when you deal with it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like a past.
Yes. Uh-huh.
I love how
That's
you
great.
put in there, bring it to the Lord and ask the Lord for the timing part too, because I
Mm.
think that's so crucial. At least for my experience,
Yeah.
it's been, if I act on that thought instead of asking the Lord, sometimes my timing's off
Yes.
and
Mhm.
I'm not sensitive to whatever they're
Mhm.
dealing with in the
Right.
moment, and it could make it worse too.
Right.
But
Yeah.
the Lord does make
Mhm.
room for
Yeah.
those conversations if we invite Him into it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
One question I want to end on. We've kind of talked about like fear, anger. I think has kind of played in a factor with the venting. How do you help your child not hold on to those emotions and just kind of live in fear, live in anger, live in sadness, live in a place where they can't forgive people? How do you kind of help them
Mm.
work through that?
What's that look like for you?
Mhm.
Yeah. So for me, it's again, my situation kind of helps dictate why I come at it this way. But it is a walking, again, it sounds redundant, but it's real practical. It's just walking it out in my own life on
Mhm.
full display for them to see,
Yeah.
and being open and transparent and having communication. And then also finding myself in a space where we can walk through it with other people, godly counsel. We can walk through those situations that are difficult together. I think it's just one of those deals where there's so many things in life that can cause us to get derailed. We have to be just open to what's going on around us. We have to be open to their feelings and the emotions. And as they come, we readdress them. We bring the Lord into them. We sit and have conversations. We pray. We bring scripture into it. And through it all, knowing that the Lord's helping us, we're building faith and momentum. And as we continue to build a little more faith and momentum, that situation got easier. The next one will get a little easier. We reflect back on what the Lord's done. It's just not losing faith and not losing hope in the situations that we face, I think, is really for my life. Because again, we're in 2 separate homes with children. So the things they have at mom's house get brought to dad's house and vice versa. And we may deal with something today that was completely unexpected. And then they go home to mom and we have to come back and revisit it again. So it's just managing things, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I think kind of what we said before, a couple of things on emotions, that emotions are real, but they're not always true. Some people put it as emotions are a terrible boss. Our feelings are a terrible boss. But they're so real at times that our kids and ourselves, honestly, at any given time when those emotions are strong, it's easy to let them be the boss.
Yeah,
certainly.
To take the lead and to be determining how I'm talking, how I'm responding, what I'm saying, all of that. So I think to, one, name the emotions is helpful. And then to say, I understand that's how you're feeling right now, but let's talk about what's true. If they are, I'm so fearful, you know, if they're like stuck in fear or stuck in worry or stuck in anger or stuck in self-loathing, whatever it is, let's name it and say, okay, your child says, I'm just worried all the time. I think I have anxiety.
Yeah.
All right, tell me what that means.
Yeah.
What does that look like? Okay, so sometimes you feel worried. That's very normal. But are there times that you're not worried? No, I'm always worried. Okay, well, what about this? You know, and, or if they are, say, well, do you have to be worried about that?
Yeah.
You know, and you just have these conversations that name it. And then I think too, sometimes when a child gets stuck in an emotion, it's really all they could see.
Yeah.
And so it takes somebody from the outside looking in to point out, hey, you know what? You just smiled.
Yeah.
But they're like, I never smile. I never feel happy. You know what? I heard you giggling last night in your room. That's so much to be thankful for. Look, the joy is coming back. And so we're noticing, we're speaking into it, what is true instead of just what is being felt.
Yeah.
So I think to name it, acknowledge it, don't say, oh, don't worry, or oh, don't be afraid, or just come on, put a smile on your face. Sometimes that is true. I had to tell our 3-year-old a lot to, okay, we're going with a happy heart and a happy face. So just choose it right now.
Do it.
Just slap it on your face. But to kind of name it, give real practical things for how to not let it be the boss, and to point out when other emotions are present that they're just overlooking can be really helpful.
Yeah, totally.
That's good.
Oh, well, this was a great episode, great conversation
Yes.
about emotions. So thank you, Billy, for
Thank you
being
for
a
having
part
me.
of it. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Just remember that you can parent and we can help.